In my 20s, I dated this Korean American guy who told me the story about when he was younger, his whole family went to McDonald's. And his grandmother was there, and he asked her, "Halmoni, tell me what you want to eat so I can order for you." And she's so stubborn that she's like, "No, no, no, I'll do it. 내가 할게." And he just was like, "Fine, whatever." So they, get to the front of the line, and he orders for everybody in their family. And then he's finally like, "Halmoni, it's your turn." And she comes up to the counter and says, "I will have one McDonald's." Welcome to the Damned If You Do podcast, where two cousins share our experiences growing up as children of immigrants
and how we navigate the world today as teachers, mothers, and women of color who have something to say.
Girl, you know his grandma meant Big Mac.
I was going to say fish fillet, really Filet-O-Fish, which every Korean gets wrong, but that's probably a second gen person saying that. First gen, Big Mac.
I always say it's the Big Mac. Like, every Korean immigrant gets the Big Mac because it's literally the first combo meal. So they just get up to the menu and they go, "I'll take that number one."
Because it's number one in my heart.
Number one. Hey everybody, this is Linda and Praise again. And we just want to thank you so much for listening to our first episode. It was really cool to see how many people, listen to it on either Spotify or YouTube. And man, we were really impressed. And so thanks for coming back for episode number 2. That episode was very specific to CFC, but we're kind of kicking it off this time with, what we had originally planned to do.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for joining us. So we want to talk a little bit about us, our relationship. We are cousins. We grew up together. We spent a lot of time growing up. I'm an only child. Praise is a brother. And very typical of children of immigrants, right? Our parents work around the clock. My parents worked 6 days a week. And the only reason is because my mom actually has been a Christian almost her entire life. And so church was the one thing that was non-negotiable. Not that my dad attended, but I think most people can relate to immigrants, right? Like, they worked at least 5 days, if not 6 or 7. Maybe federal holidays taken off. Maybe Christmas, right? So I would get dumped off at Praise's place a couple times a month. Our grandmother would take care of us, much to her chagrin. And she did the best she could, truly. So we have a lot of memories together.
We grew up like sisters. And in fact, I was talking about Lynn to my boss because, Linda's a teacher in CPS and so am I. And I was talking about my cousin who works at another school, CPS being Chicago Public Schools. And she's like, "So who is this you're talking about?" And I'm like, "She's my cousin, but like more like a sister, really best friends. We grew up together." I gave her such a long introduction.
She was like, "I'm bored."
Like, okay, I know. And but then like 2 weeks later, she's like, "So did you talk to your cousin, sister, best friend, or?" But that's basically us. She nailed it, and that's how we are. And that's why we can't stop laughing when we get together.
Oh my God. There's a phenomenon very specific to me and Praise where when we get together, we're just like, shooting the shit, just kicking it. And then sure enough, very, very soon into our conversation, we're laughing. Then we're clapping. Yes, we clap like old women together. Then we start pushing each other.
This is actually like our 5th take because we could not stop laughing.
We couldn't get ourselves together. We could not get our shit together.
I cannot make eye contact with this person at this moment.
So when we're on a roll and we're like laughing really hard, if my husband or her husband starts walking into the room and they see us, they like exit immediately. They start walking backwards. This is just it's our relationship, and all the isms in our relationship are so specific to us that I feel like a lot of people sometimes feel like they have a hard time penetrating that world. But this is a world we want to share.
And one of the ways we're going to do it is by sharing a couple of stories that we feel define our relationship to some degree. Like, they kind of represent who we are.
Or were.
Yeah, or were. And so my story is that when Linda was applying for jobs in her 20s, I think she was 27, and she asked if she could use me as a personal reference. And I said, of course. And so she wrote me in. And then she gave me the job application so I could proofread it. But as I was looking, she's like, I've known this personal reference for 27 years because Linda was 27, but I'm a year and a half younger than she is. So, I was like, Linda, how could you have known me before I was born? Which then made us laugh for like 100 hours for no reason.
Our relationship transcends everything.
Space, everything.
Time. We were in utero together, in spirit, kindred spirits. My memory is when we were young, I want to say maybe like 6 or 7, maybe even 5 or 6. It's one of those Saturdays I got dumped off at her place, and our grandma has her hands full. We actually went outside. I think your brother was inside, and it was just me and Praise.
I don't know. I ditched his ass.
Oh, we never cared about him. He absolutely could have been right next to you.
I feel bad.
Second sib. What can you do? It's a trauma that, only
he knows.
Only siblings know.
Yeah.
Younger siblings, I should say. And so I dared Praise to walk across the street blindfolded. Which she did. And I was very much like the mischievous older sibling. That's the role I basically played. And she was so naive and so eager.
Rude.
If you've seen the cover art, look at her. Look at her eyes. So dark, so sincere. There's a rain cloud over her for a reason. Too sincere. I totally exploited that. She walked with total fear, with great trepidation that only made me laugh harder. This is a residential street. I should clarify. So it's not like she's walking, right, like through oncoming traffic. It's purely residential, but what I did not stop her in time. She walked into a barbed fence where one of the wires was actually exposed, and it jabbed her between the eyes. And we got so scared because we didn't want to experience the wrath of our grandmother. If you know anything about any maternal figure in a Korean family, it is like, especially the grandmother, iron fist. She rules the house with an iron fist because it's all about hierarchy and you idolize your elders. Their word is the final word. And I got terrified and I rushed into the house and I put a Band-Aid. I fastened a Band-Aid between her eyes, and I was thinking, she will never know.
Okay, so I have some clarifications because Linda has the worst memory on earth.
What happened? Tell
First
me
of
my
all,
life.
It was not a barbed wire fence because we are not in prison. It was just the latch of the fence, like the gate that opens to the home. But there was like this part of the latch, and so I walked right into that.
Some fences are made of barbed wire.
What is in the middle of Chicago? That's chain link, dude. That is not barbed wire.
I meant chain link.
All right, so she meant chain link, but whatever. And then the other thing is, we were raised by the grandmother that we share, right? So. That grandmother was a sweetheart. Like, she was really the most kindest person. What Linda's memory is, it's my maternal grandmother, the one that we don't share, like, my family. And that grandma, she's like 4'11". She is tough as shit. That lady was mean and tough.
So who was watching us that day?
She was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that, it was not our sweet grandma, but it was the one that
the mean one.
Rules with the iron fist. The mean one.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so that those are my 2 clarifications. And one more. The Band-Aid that you put on me was not like the regular Band-Aid. It was the round kind. As if you put a round kind right in the middle of my forehead, it's gonna,
What was her reaction when she found out? I don't remember that.
We were trying to hide from her in the basement bathroom, and we literally were we were like, we're gonna get away with this. We're gonna get away with this. And we turned out from the bathroom, and it was like a horror film. She was right behind us. Like you could see it zoom in on her face, like the camera.
What was her response? Do you remember?
Yeah, she went. You go, 뭐야? What is that? Basically, she was like, what is that? And we just ran away. But my mom still blames you till this day.
I know.
You put a mark in my beautiful child. You know, you were the one who led her astray.
That shit will ride me. That shit will ride me to my grave. It has. This is a story that's revisited every couple of years.
And sometimes my mom talks about how sweet Linda has become in her, like, you know, adulthood. And I know exactly why she's saying that, because she's comparing it to the story about, you know, the barbed wire fence.
So we watched Shang-Chi a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk about that movie for this episode. It's actually not a review, more so a description of what came up for us while we were watching the movie and some things that surfaced, you know, in reflecting upon it. So overall, my review is thumbs up.
It's not a review, but let me review it.
Yeah, but that's it. That's the extent with which I'm going to review it.
We enjoyed it immensely in terms of entertainment.
Right.
Lots of laughter and talking and being shushed by our producer, Mia.
Who watched it with us. And we totally did talk too much throughout that movie. But those were good moments that we reflected upon later in kind of thinking and synthesizing what this movie meant to us.
So we're just kind of going to go through those moments. The first one being, like, the fact that we were laughing so hard sometimes, or having, like, a visceral reaction and guffawing at certain scenes when nobody else was laughing at all.
And vice versa.
Exactly. So one of those examples happens at the beginning of the movie. By the way, we haven't said this yet, but spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie and you really want to, you probably should stop listening to us right now. But, okay, so at the beginning of the movie, there is this scene where everybody is at Aquafina's house, which is not her name. Her name is Katie in the movie. So they're all at Katie's house, and it's like breakfast time, and the whole family's, you know, sitting around there. And the grandmother in her family says in Chinese, like, when are you two going to get married? Talking about Shang-Chi and Katie, and we just burst out laughing. We guffawed. We were, like, snorting to a silent theater.
Yeah. I don't know if I was laughing that hard, but it was definitely a moment like, of course she said that.
Of course she said that, because we have heard that comment 1 million times in our lives.
Yep.
So It's one of those things where it just felt like, I mean, I know lots of cultures and lots of people might have that, but man, it is so prevalent in ours. The other one that we laughed but was confused about why other people were laughing was when Ronnie Chang's character, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his name, but the guy who, you know, he's kind of running that underground fighting scene. He says, don't worry, I speak ABC. And everybody burst out laughing, but we were like, do they know that ABC means American-born Chinese? I don't know.
Right. Which I doubt that everyone's in the know about that. So that was just like another interesting cultural moment for us, I think.
Yeah.
In watching it, because that's the thing, right? It's when you are, you know, Asian American watching, right, which could be considered in some ways groundbreaking, not entirely, but, right, like for MCU, right? All Asian cast, main protagonist, right, Asian, and you're watching this, you can't help but, consider and wonder, like, well, how are other folks watching it? Namely, non-Asians, namely white people. How are they watching this, right? That's that double consciousness that we always carry with us. And so I think when we are laughing in those moments, I really like the ABC moment is perfect. Like, what are they laughing at? Could it be the one and same thing? I doubt it.
And we can't help it. We have to have this sort of double consciousness, right? When we're watching that, we're experiencing it as Asian Americans, but then we're also experiencing it from the white gaze,
right?
That we can't escape,
right? And I already knew, even before the movie finished, I imagined and already anticipated conversations where if I found myself in a conversation about this particular movie, someone would either be like, right, celebrating the fact that it's Asian American and inevitably ask me how I felt about that, right? Like somehow inviting me into that conversation.
Yeah.
Or like asking me, did it do it justice? right?
Yeah.
Like, was I offended? Do I think other people might be offended? But even then of itself, it forces, it provokes this self-consciousness that other people of course don't experience, who are not people of color, right?
And it makes me think of how I didn't even feel excited about the film at first. Like, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, and I really enjoyed it. But at first, I'm like, well, it's about Chinese culture and Chinese cinema and Chinese people, and I don't necessarily relate to that as a Korean person or a Korean American. We share immigrant experiences with our fellow Chinese American friends, but that it's our cultures are so very different in many ways, and so I didn't know how I would relate to it as an Asian American. It was a very strange concept for me to think, oh, I'm going to go into this as an Asian American, as if I should relate to something, which I did. I related to different, like, Asian immigrant sort of tropes or jokes or themes that were coming up. But yeah, it's a weird identity, not crisis, but it puts you in a weird space before you go in.
Mm-hmm. And after and during.
And after and during. Okay, leading us to the second point. We wrote this on a piece of paper, and Linda should have written it because she has better handwriting than me. Okay, so the second thing is the acknowledgement piece. You want to talk about this one?
There's a scene early on, before like any of the huge action-packed scenes, where Katie's she's trying her hand at shooting arrows. And finally, it's the moment where she does successfully shoot it near the target. And there's I don't know his character's name, but it's like the old Asian man who kind of shepherds all the other people.
Why do you have to say Asian when every single person is Asian? Okay, the old Asian man. Got it. Keep going. You know, the guru, right? The one that's like in charge of the wise old man. Got it.
He's the one who's like preparing everyone for combat, essentially. Right. And so she gets really excited, and she looks over at him really excitedly, like, see, I did it. I told you I could do it. And he, like, almost indiscernibly nods. It's a very, like, reluctant, slow nod, right? And I joked to Praise. I leaned over and I said, that's how my dad would have reacted. To which Praise joked. She was like, no, because he wouldn't even acknowledge you. Which is true. Which is very true. Speaks very true to my dad and my relationship with him and him as a person.
Which we'll probably talk about later, because Linda and I both have one parent, her dad and my mom, who, like, live in their own universe. Like, as they take each step in life, their universe, just moves with them, and they don't
They're
know.
never wrong.
They're never wrong. They don't know what we're saying, like, ever.
And they don't care to. They don't ever care to get to know us.
So, like, if Linda Kim had shot that arrow at a bullseye, and she looks at her dad for approval, he would be reading a book about philosophy.
Or the Korean newspaper.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think what that speaks to is, right, I think most of us can relate to, there's at least one person in your life whom you've always tried to seek approval from, right? Oftentimes it's a parent figure, and or a partner, and or friends, whomever, right? And I think the one that, like, kind of sears most deeply is when you're trying to seek it from the parent or parents or guardians, right? That figure in your life, and you never do. And you kind of, like, whatever decisions you make in your childhood, in your teen years, in your adult life, you feel that. You feel you're never enough. You're never, right? No matter how accomplished you may be, no matter the things that you have actually done with your life, you feel it. And so I think it was, like, just us kind of being reminded of in a comedic way.
If we don't laugh about it,
you're going to cry about it.
You're going to cry about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the great thing about being women in our 40s. It feels funny at this point. I mean,
right.
All the tears and the pain and all the coffee-stained letters that
that I wrote.
That Linda
to
wrote.
My dad.
Yeah, I didn't, because my parents can't read English. And I can't write in Korean, but it's all part of that journey of knowing that our parents will never truly understand us, and we don't truly understand them, but...
And that's okay.
Yeah, you get to a point where that's okay.
Really quickly, I will share a story of how I have a history of fighting with my dad. My mom was always my biggest advocate, and I always heads with my dad.
Also, my dad was my greatest advocate, and he is related to Linda's mom. So there's
something about that.
Something about that family.
Yeah.
They're nice people.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
anyway.
uncharacteristically generous and progressive for Koreans of that generation.
Yeah.
Whereas my dad is a lot more. You're very like old school stoic, right? Like I have zero emotions, kind of generation.
Your mom used to say, "Chanya, your daddy's so liberal." He's liberal. I'm like, I don't know what that. Do you mean like a neoliberal, like or progress? Anyway, so back to your dad.
I think a really. Life is so messy and complex, and so many things happen, and I don't think that I have a lot of really clear moments in my life that I can pinpoint to specific realizations, but one of them actually would be when there was a moment that I had in college where I wrote this letter. That's what Praise alluded to earlier. I wrote this letter that took me like literally 3 months to write. I carried it everywhere with me. It had coffee stains. It had cigarette burns in it. Where I finally decided to have the balls to write down all the things I never had the courage to say to my dad to his face. It was like maybe 7-8 pages long, double-sided, handwritten. And I finally left it in his office. He never acknowledged it verbally. Weeks passed. More than a month passed. And then suddenly I had an envelope. I think he left it somewhere. I don't remember exactly where I found it. He wrote me a letter back in kind. And I realized, one, it was longer than mine. And I realized that he wrote it first in Korean and then had it he translated in English, which of course took him longer, right? And the fascinating thing about that letter is it didn't address anything I wrote in my letter. Literally, it was an absolutely different letter. And it ended with a poem that he had written from, and this is no joke, I'm not playing with you. He wrote it from Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. Like, what does my dad even know about that book? Or that anthology of books? Like, what the fuck? He copied a poem from that book. Like, I'm imagining him reading, like, skimming that and being like, yes, this is the one for my daughter. Though nothing addressed what I had written. And I was so touched. And that was a very clear defining moment where I realized, he will never get me. And I will never get him. And guess what? It doesn't matter because he loves me enough to try. And I love him enough to try. Right? So that was definitely a turning point in my life with my relationship with my dad.
I had a moment like that with my mom where, because I can't write in Korean and she can't write in English, my senior year of college, I stayed up all night talking on the phone with her. We fought all night from 10 p.m. till 5 in the morning, to the point where I fell asleep.
You pulled an all-nighter.
I pulled an all-nighter to tell my mom everything, all the things that I felt so resentful about or whatever. I can't even tell you what they are anymore, you know? It was so long ago. And I distinctly remember multiple times in the conversation, she said, "You think you were so good? You think you were such a perfect daughter?" And I was like, "No, that's not the point." And then toward the end, she's just kind of offered up a frustrated, "Fine, just forgive me, all right? Just let it go, all right?" Mm-hmm. And we hung up the phone, and I did not let that shit go. I resented her ass for another, I don't know. I would probably say, 4 to 5 years probably.
That's nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing. I let that shit go before I turned 30. But there are still times where she'll hit that button, that thing she'll trigger it, and then the great thing is I just hang up the phone. Good it's I don't even say good now when that happens. I'm I'm triggered, bye. Bye. Yeah, that's gone. And then she actually sometimes these days apologizes. I don't know why I said that. I shouldn't have said that. I know. It's a shock.
That's a big step, actually.
It's a big step for her.
Yeah.
But, it only took her 7 decades plus.
I think that's great.
Hey, anyone can grow.
While she's alive. While you're alive, while you both are.
Speaking of which, our penultimate point is the daughter's role in this movie. When there's that big fight scene at the end, she slays that. Oh, not slays. What is she? She tames the dragon. She's riding the dragon around. She's so cool. She's so tough. And we were just boggled. We were so bewildered at the fact that Shang-Chi has all the rings.
So this is the point in the scene where they're getting pulled apart, right?
That's
so
right.
He's holding onto her with both hands. He has to make a choice. Is it that he holds on to her?
Right. Or is her again?
Or is it that he actually, like, slays the dragon in that moment? And she says to him, just let go. Just let go. And to which he replies, I'm not going to leave you again. Right? Which references a conflict between them that's mentioned earlier in the film. And Praise and I were like, just give her 5 rings, motherfucker. Like, she would take care of herself, which she already clearly can. Right? You can let go, slay the dragon, but let her be her own protagonist, her own heroine. Come on.
Why does she have 0 inheritance? Like, why does she have 0? It's like my parents being like, if you don't have sons, you will have no inheritance. I'm like, why? Why can't we pass it to the girls? Oh, the names won't pass on. Why not? We can do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, your son's name is Kim.
My for the record, I have 2 sons, and they've actually retained my last name non-hyphenated. Just my last name. Even though, I mean, their father is their biological father, whom I'm with. Who is my partner. They have my last name, which is Kim, because my husband is white American, and I want them to have, like, I want their last name to signify Korean heritage right away.
Yeah, and we included we didn't hyphenate the last names either in our family, but it's still a double last name. I don't know, it's confusing now for everybody. They just think Lee is their middle name, but I don't know. We didn't know what to do at the time, but the same reason, we wanted some sort of, like, I am Korean immediately somewhere in there, you know.
Right. And the point is, it can be done.
It can be done. Give her 5 rings. I do not understand why you have to have 10
rings. Come on now.
Why do you have to have 10 rings? Is there something about how if the 10 rings aren't together, they cannot be used? Unless you tell me that that's the truth. Actually, don't tell me. I'm just gonna. There's
no logic that's created enough to like that would have been illogical. There's no folklore really explained behind the rings in this movie.
Just give her
aside from rings. The Mandarin's backstory, right? But the rings themselves, whatever. Anything could have happened. Anything could have gone. What didn't go down was her getting 5 rings.
It, like, brought up so many weird memories for me, too, and my parents, and how they always say, like, oh, living with my brother is more sturdy. You know, in Korean, you say, 튼튼해. You know, like, it's stronger, it's sturdier. Or, like, they always, it's weird because my brother thinks they think I'm smarter or they think I'm whatever. So he has, on the younger brother end, he always feels jealous about the way that they view me. But I always get the patriarchal bullshit from my parents about my brother, and I'm like, yo, I'm strong too.
as the door has already been closed.
The door is closed.
Yeah, they already left.
But it's a weird thing to always feel like you're not trusted simply because of your gender, and and it happened to me. I lived for 8 to 9 years in South Korea, and that happened often. I just looked at Mia and said, right, because she also lived there for a few years, and it's just you're just looked down upon so quick. That happens in the U.S. too. It's not just Korea, but especially in our family, like, it was just there.
Yeah.
Like, they don't trust you with the money, or they don't trust you to make the smart decision.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what? That's insane. Right. I've been making smart decisions my whole life. I don't know.
Or, like, you have good ideas, but let's get it confirmed.
Oh, that's a big one.
Mail.
And, I love the fact that your dad also asks you to confirm with my brother.
I know.
It's like he's not even your brother.
I know.
What does he call my brother again? The smartest man or something?
I don't know, the smartest, richest man in our family. Which is actually true, but richest, I mean. Of our generation.
He's probably like, nah. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah.
You also noticed the part where when she's supposed to look like her, when Shang-Chi meets
his aunt.
Michelle Yao, yeah.
Michelle Yao, who plays, his mom's sister, who goes up to him and says, you look just like your mom. He doesn't. Because in real life, why would he? Why can't that be said to her? She is the most underdeveloped minor character in the movie, but she's his sister.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I'm like, it really, all she could say is, Shang-Chi, your mother has told me so much about you. You have her gifts, you have her blah, 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 whatever, whatever. Then turn to the sister and say, you look just like her.
Right.
You have all the same gifts. Nope, none of that.
Nope.
She's like, oh, hey, you're there too.
But not even.
I know.
I feel like they could have propped up just a...
Yeah. I mean, she's even more impressive if you think about it. She got no training.
Yeah.
She learned all that shit by herself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, she started an empire, all that whatever. So she's actually more impressive in many ways. But of course, doesn't matter.
No.
Right?
They could have propped up a puppet and called her. Wouldn't have mattered.
No. Which leads us to our last point.
It's the scene where the dad is about to die. It's the final confrontation showdown between Shang-Chi and the Mandarin, his father. And the dad is actually at the very, very end of that scene vulnerable.
It's such a it's an important scene to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematography, it's doing that like sort of spinning thing that Asian cinematographers do, like where it's like between lovers, but actually it's between father and son,
Mm-hmm.
And there's the action is going on, but it's almost like a still, moment in time where they're being vulnerable toward each other, and Shang-Chi is saying, you weren't there for us, and when we needed you, and in fact you trained us to be killers instead, or whatever. And he at first is defensive, but right at the end he admits that he maybe wasn't the best father. I don't know how he said it, I forget. But just before he is killed, he transfers the rings to his son. So he dies for them, for them to live on, I suppose. So it's a sacrifice. And Linda leans over to me and goes, why does it take literally a life and death moment for an Asian parent to be vulnerable about how they feel?
And actually admit that they love their child. Why does it have to be on the precipice of death?
Oh my God, we laughed so hard. We just laughed so hard.
Because I think it rings really true for us. So, I think a lot of people, especially if you're Asian descent, you're children of immigrants, or immigrants, you're an immigrant yourself, you probably cultivated or grew up in a home that cultivated almost no emotion. No affection, no emotional affection, no physical affection. I have never, ever, ever seen my parents kiss.
Nope.
I'm a middle-aged woman, y'all. I have never seen them kiss. I might have seen them hold hands a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it was a funeral or like their anniversary or something really like a very specific date.
Or they're old and frail and taking a walk.
Yeah, and they're just like helping each other walk. The shoulder, like the back, the hand on the shoulder, or the arm.
I did see your mom kiss your dad on the forehead once.
Wow.
Remember the shiny part? That was that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no affection. But interestingly, when I talk to certain people about that, like especially people who are not Asian, I describe my home as a home full of affection. And it's like, there's a Korean word called 애정. I don't know. It's like we had a home full of like love and talking and like care, but it was just expressed differently. And when I talk to people, especially who haven't had that, also like any race, who haven't had that sort of support or whatever it is that I'm thinking of, I realize I did have it. Minus all the problems I had with my mom. Minus everything. I did have it. Like, we grew up in a house where I knew that I was loved and cared for, that I'm going to be supported no matter what, that my parents are sacrificing everything for me, so, I mean, it puts a lot of pressure in different ways, but the love or care I felt. It's one of the surprising things about growing older, that you realize that was there. You move on from just the resentment that you feel, and then you're like, oh damn, they did what they could, and they actually loved me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as an adult, that can become very clear to you. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I grew up knowing I was cared for, knowing I was loved most of the time.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stand by the fact that I don't think that I grew up in a home. There was no emotional language.
No.
I did not grow up in a home where we could say that things were difficult. That we did not talk about when we were sad, right? We just went to whatever room and closed the door, right? A lot of maybe microaggressions, teasing, but there was no ever. I don't remember any apologies.
Our house is
I don't
full
remember
of
any
shouting.
Acknowledgement or ownership of wrongdoing.
No.
Right? Shouting, passive aggressiveness, or aggression.
Yeah.
And then it was swept under the rug.
Yep. Moving on.
Yeah. I don't remember apologies. I don't remember hearing I love you.
It's the vulnerability of emotion that wasn't there. And
right.
I'm not, it's it's so complex, because I can't just be like, oh, it's a Korean thing. Because I do have Korean American friends too, where their parents actually showed them some vulnerability. But is it just a Korean American thing? Is it a post-Korean War, these people had to live so hard that, during Korean War and then afterward, that, they're just living on survival.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if they had the luxury of developing any sort of emotional language, or
right.
is psychology and emotional language and emotion, like EQ, a Western construct, and it's not as important in the Eastern hemisphere. It's growing, but...
Yeah. I think this is very complex. I don't personally think it's specific to being Asian American, even. But I'm sorry. I don't think it's specific to being Korean American. I do think that there are very specific cultural aspects to it being Asian American, right? Because it's the stoicism, it's the saving of face. But I also think it's generational, right? So I think a lot of...
Yeah.
Right, non-Asian people would say of a specific generation, people didn't really talk about their emotions. People definitely grew up with war or served in the war or they were impacted by it. A lot of people grew up in post-colonial times. A lot of people grew up in places that were occupied, right? So I think of those generations. It's when you grow up with so much trauma, it almost erases your ability to have an emotional vocabulary or language.
You have to push back whatever emotions you may feel so that you could survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just have to push it back. And then after you push it back so much, you don't know how to feel them.
Right.
And I think even as second generation kids, you and I experienced that, where we were in survival mode, being kids of immigrants, and then we get to adult age and think, I don't feel anything.
I feel two. I'm Linda. I have two emotions.
I say that to my therapist all the time.
Anger and happiness.
Anger and happiness, that's right. I have versions of anger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The layers of anger are
right.
So rich. It's so nuanced, right?
I think...
But the other emotions.
Yeah. I literally ask my therapist every time she says, how do you feel? I go, I don't know. Pull up that emotion wheel.
Really? Which is really funny because Praise and I are CPS teachers, and part of what we teach is socio-emotional skills, as it is for any teacher who cares, right? And it's funny because I've literally shown that there is an emotion wheel, folks, right? Where it's it literally breaks down a lot of emotions. It sometimes characterizes them or describes them. And I'm we're talking about our emotions, we're feeling our feelings, we're acknowledging harm, we're trying to do restorative justice with our students. And sometimes I look at that emotion wheel a moment longer than them because I need to figure out what my emotions are. And that's okay, right?
You're like, Miss Kim? Miss Kim?
Are you okay?
I think the interesting thing that this movie brought for me, and I didn't even expect it to be this way, it's not even the movie that caused it, it's Linda's comment, which is, she's saying, how come it takes that life and death moment for one of our parents to actually be vulnerable? And my mom, who has never been vulnerable to me a day of her life, she has always been hypercritical, quick to anger. There's good parts of her too, but I'm not going to explore those moments right now.
It's not relevant.
It's not relevant to the conversation.
And it's minor compared to the other one.
Actually, yeah. There's some minor moments, but in general, like, she just lived a really tough life, and she's got lots of, weird health ailments that make her body not cooperate with her. I mean, there's a million things I could say about her, which we'll probably maybe talk about in future podcasts, but, like, recently I kept thinking about Linda's line that, you can't, like, our parents don't share with us unless they're in life and death moments. And my mom has been so vulnerable lately that I keep thinking she's going to die, which is like, really light information for a fun movie podcast. But right. I really feel like, there's, even my mom is coming to a point where she knows that, she's not going to live forever. And she needs to say what she needs to say to the people that she's going to, who are going to, survive her. So she, like, recently we were having this phone conversation, which of course I was like bawling through. I'm like, God damn it, how come my mom still has this effect on me,
Most parents do.
But my mom and dad own a house, and they gave it to me. Like, they split their inheritance. Unlike Shang-Chi's parents, okay? They split their inheritance pretty 50-50 with my brother and myself. And they gave it to us somewhat early because of the way that things worked out with their health care. But I was talking to my mom for a long time about how I sold the house, and she needs to let me know if she's going to move back from California, where she lives with my brother, to Chicago, because I would buy her a place to live with this money that I got from selling the house. And she basically told me no. She's not moving back. She's not going to be near us. And it was such a heartbreaking moment for me, because I felt like, but I don't know how much longer you're going to live, and I want you by me. That was like such a huge, like, factor for me to sell the house even quicker. And the fact that she, like, didn't want to move back. But here comes the moment of vulnerability. I thought, she was like picking on me for, like, getting a low price for the house. I'm like, do you know the market, woman? No, she does not. She doesn't even care. But I thought she was just criticizing me for not getting as high of a price. But what she was trying to say is that she wished that I got more, because I deserved more, because she wanted to give me more, because in my youth she couldn't give me anything at all. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more I could say about that conversation, but it was the first time she admitted that life was hard for me. Like, referencing back to my phone call with her, she's like, "What, you were such a great daughter?" I mean, that's how she was talking to me in my 20s. And now in my 40s, she's saying, "You were a great daughter, and you had to take care of so many things because we didn't know how to live in America, and you spoke English. And I prayed that you would speak English so well and be articulate so that you could do all this work for us."
I think that's a very common narrative for children of immigrants, right, where we have the labor, and you much more than me, but a lot of us have the labor of really helping navigate, the journey to Americanism for our parents, and it's everything survival, everything from, right, choosing where you live to, like, what jobs are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Who's gonna communicate to the customers? Who's gonna be the cashier? Who's gonna bag up the stuff? Who's gonna, like, help get the food? Who's gonna cook? Like, just all the things. But everything's written in English, right? Like, your example of, what's that example of you reading the house deed?
Oh, yeah. When my parents bought their house in Skokie when I was in, like, middle school, I had to, like, translate for them in the brokerage of the deal. I was 10.
And then your parents asked you, "Is that a good deal?"
I'm like, I don't know. How am I supposed? But then also they got upset at me when I didn't translate with the anger that they felt sometimes, or when I didn't translate exactly, the frustrations they had. And then they blamed me if something went down.
Yeah.
A way that they didn't want. So this is life. I mean, it's weird because it infantilizes them in our eyes to some degree.
Right. And they know that. So they have to experience all the indignities, right?
Yep.
All the indignities that they have to eat, that they have to emotionally swallow, while we're kind of doing more of the physical logistical things.
Right.
Right? And then feeling resentful toward that.
Right.
And then also feeling like the white gaze and the self-consciousness of, right, being of a different race, culture, ethnicity, whatever.
It makes me think this is why our parents act so angry, or they're so angry with us, because when you are angry, you are bigger. You feel bigger. You feel more powerful, because if you give in to the shame that you feel for the language you can't speak, for the alienness of your existence in a country like the US, you feel small.
Yeah.
And so why not be angry then?
Right.
Why not say that fuck you bitchy?
my dad doesn't say fuck you bitchy. My dad's favorite swear was damn she.
Oh, damn she. That's
damn
right.
Shit. He can't say damn and he can't say shit. And he would always he would conflate them. So I just remember him stomping around the house when I was a kid. Damn she! Damn she! My son even knows that swear. And it's like a comedic hallmark in our home. I can also relate to that vulnerability. My mom 5 years ago was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, and it's been a very difficult season in my life. And it has forced my dad and I to problem solve and tag team and work together in a way we never have had to do so before. And in my adult years, I've gotten along better with my dad. But in a very compartmentalized, manageable way where I'd spend a couple hours with him every weekend, and that would be it, right? And distance oftentimes makes things easier, right? But I think with my mom's diagnosis and her physical and mental and emotional cognitive decline, my dad and I have had to work more and more together every day almost in some capacity. And I'd visit him for a couple hours every weekend, and distance makes things oftentimes easier, right? And safer. But since my mom's diagnosis and her physical, cognitive and emotional decline, trying to figure out her care, and at this point she needs around-the-clock care, my dad and I have had to make a lot of decisions together. We've had to experience a lot of heartbreaking moments together. And it's been interesting because my dad is a very, very stoic person. I don't recall him even talking about things being difficult when we grew up, much less him not being able to do it, much less being angry or, frustrated, I'm sure, in the many ways that he did. I can only speculate, right? But in these years, I've heard him open up in a way that I never have before. I've heard him describe my mom and his love for my mom in a way I never have before. He has shared with me things that she has said to him about me or about him that I never knew. And so it's been really eye-opening, and it's caused me, I think it's just caused me some things of, I don't even know what to do with it sometimes, and there are moments where my dad is really sad, and I've seen him cry, which I never did growing up. I'm sorry, my voice is very dry right now. My throat's very dry.
It is 11 p.m. on Sunday night.
And when he's having, I am so used to, I think my survival was compartmentalizing my emotions a lot because I didn't really have any outlet for them growing up, right? That's not the house I grew up in. So I really learned to eat my feelings, and so to experience a lot of feelings from him these days, it almost makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, me too.
And that surprises me because in my adult years, I've worked a lot on trying to develop my own emotional language to actually tune into my emotions and give myself the space, the messy space of trying to navigate them and articulate them and fight for them and feel uncomfortable with them and being okay with not being okay. So I've been doing my own personal work in my marriage, in my friendships, in as being a teacher and a mom. But I've not figured out how to share that space with my dad. So with my dad being really vulnerable and showing that sadness and that sorrow, that will never truly go away, right? At this point in his life and my mom's life, it's just been like interesting for me to sit with that.
Yeah. It's strange. And there's a little part of me that thinks, but when you're vulnerable with him, he won't listen.
He won't acknowledge me, right? But I think the beauty of that is the moment of clarity I had in college, where it's
Right.
like, we're not ships that even pass each other in the night. We're two ships on two totally different courses. And I've really learned to be okay with that, right? Like, again, he never really has to understand me in the ways that I may have wanted in my youth. And I will never understand him. I will never understand his love and devotion to my mom, truly, because I'm her daughter. I'm not, right, her husband. And that's the finite understanding that we all have as people, right? You can grow up with this, in your family, when you grow up, you actually all have different experiences. You have different relationships with each other, right? And though we may share a lot of things, sharing those experiences doesn't capture the full experience of all the unsaid things, right? And so, and sometimes unknown things, even to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's just been really interesting thinking about all these things. So, again, this was not a review of Shang-Chi, right? This is a very personal, nuanced
2 thumbs up for parent vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, this is just what came up for us. And I will end it with a true moment that Praise and I had after the movie finished. Some people cheered, right?
Yeah, there was lots of clapping and cheering.
Lots of clapping, lots of cheering, and Praise and I looked at each other and we were like, see, Asian people, we are fun. We are athletic. We are mysterious. We sometimes can't pronounce each other's Asian names. All of these things are true and exist.
And with that, I'd like to say, Praise and Linda, we are fun. We are not athletic. But we are mysterious to no one. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you coming back for episode number 2. Don't expect episode number 3 by next week. You know we got lives going on, but we really appreciate connecting with you in this way. If you want to email us, we have an email. It is damnedifyoudopodcast@gmail.com. We know that's a mouthful, but somebody took damnedifyoudo@gmail.com. That really made us annoyed. So it's damnedifyoudopodcast@gmail.com. Email us with any questions, but 0 complaints. Thank you. Thanks to Mia, our producer extraordinaire.
And to Clark for this awesome music we got for free, 99.
You can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever.
You can also email us at damnedifyoudopodcast@gmail.com. It's a mouthful, but you're worth it. Hey y'all, this is Linda. Glad to be with you here.
Keep going. We cannot start this over 100 times. Y'all, this is... That's Mia. This is us, okay? This is how we are. We are trying to be profesh.
We always laugh together.
We always laugh together, and the glasses of wine did not help. We also had like 100 crab rangoons. But we're going to get it together for you. Because y'all showed up in that first episode, and it was important.
Wait, I feel like you're about to turn... Don't turn this off.
Don't turn this off. Keep going. Don't turn this off. Keep going. Don't turn this off. Keep going.